Alright, so today I'm going to be talking about depression versus a cycle of depression. I think that generally there's a misconception as to what depression really is. Being in a depressive state is very different than being in a cycle of depression. So I can break it down a little. So you have depression, cycle of depression. Right. So you can be depressed
in a given moment, but not be permanently depressed or be depressed for a long period of time. Feeling depression is essentially a blanket statement for many different emotions and feelings that cause a discordance within one's harmony and energies and being. However, depression is also a natural feeling. We naturally get depressed when certain things happen at certain times so that we can process the feelings. It doesn't mean that we're going to be depressed forever even if the worst thing happens. You could be, however, that's a choice. Depression, momentary. Cycle of depression, indefinite. Okay, so I guess the question here then becomes, well, how does a momentary feeling, depression, turn into a cycle of depression? And to be quite honest, it's probably pretty subjective. It is most likely case by case. However, I would say that the primary reason that somebody ends up in a cycle of depression is because in that depressive moment, they lost a sense of choice. They lost their sense of will. Depressive states can vary, and generally the depressive states that lead you to a cycle of depression are the ones in which you suddenly feel out of control. You feel like the decisions that you're making aren't fully you. There's a missing gap between different aspects, whether it's your body, your soul, your mind. They feel disconnected. And for that reason, you suddenly feel powerless. This feeling of powerlessness is strangely addictive. And it's not necessarily addictive in the way where one wants to be addicted to this, or even desires to feel this. It's more so addictive in a sense that it erases, or not necessarily erases, but creates a blockage within 2 points, or multiple points, of your mind, body, soul, energy, that all need to be communicated. And for that reason, it takes you out of the perspective that you have a choice. So, what both of these ultimately break down to is natural experience, which is depression, and a cycle of depression, which is essentially a choice that isn't necessarily made consciously. This is a choice that is being made on a much deeper level, because it's altering your entire perspective. So here, it's a product of choice. Okay, now, this is a very important point. It is absolutely nobody's fault for anybody to end up in a cycle of depression or be depressed. let me just say this right now before I even move forward. Right now, we live in a world where most people, they walk out in their day-to-day life and they cannot resonate with their surroundings. They cannot resonate with their peers. And for that reason, people feel like outsiders. They feel like the way that systems are built, or the way that people treat the systems, all the inner dynamics just don't resonate with their inner need to just purely exist. And for that reason, depression and cycles of depression are both natural and nothing to be pointed fingers at and blamed. From my own experience, I guess I'm simply saying this from my own experience with depression. From my experience with depression, and I bet that it's quite subjective, I realized retrospectively, not that I don't feel depressed anymore. I just don't feel like I'm in a cycle of depression. That's the difference. You see, now I can feel depressed, but once I feel depressed, I can let it go. I don't hold on to it. I think part of that is fear as well. I think that a lot of feelings create a certain vibration within a human being, and the human being, as a natural response, becomes fearful of that because it understands that in order to survive, it needs to be away from that thing. However, what isn't as well understood is that your fear towards that is the thing that's going to attach you to it. If you can feel a feeling to its fullest extent, it doesn't matter how dark it is, how light it is, if you can just feel it within you and let it go, then you're free from the cycles. And of course, sometimes there's microcycles that happen as well. I mean, there's all sorts of variables that come into play here. But this is going off of my experience and what I realized. I felt that within the cycle of depression, there was almost a memory blockage. And it wasn't necessarily just intellectual. It was kind of almost... It's as if you suddenly forget your childhood. You know, it's that type of feeling where you don't necessarily forget the events, but you forget the emotional attachment that was underlying those events. And for that reason, you have a very obscured view of everything. Part of this is opening up your heart to experiences with absolute feeling and presence. Alright, so back to this. So you have depression and cycles of depression, which are both entirely natural things that happen due to different circumstance. This is simply to describe, well, what is the way out of it? What is a possible solution? Because to be honest, as far as my own experience, certainly SSRIs and benzos certainly do not work. For me at least. I mean, like, the thing is, it's short term, you know? It may be effective for that particular moment when you're feeling a feeling that you absolutely feel like you need to get rid of. But if you can't independently get rid of that feeling, you're trapped. You need to find a way to get out of that, because that's going to keep you in a very dangerous cycle, and it's not going to let you grow to your fullest potential. Okay, now back to this. Okay. Alright, so depression, cycle of depression. Choice. Okay. So let's just say that you're in a cycle of depression. You've been depressed for years. You've been depressed for months. You've been depressed for a long enough time to where you have, maybe even if there is underlying hope, there is a part of you at least that feels like there isn't a way out of it. It feels indefinite. So what can you do? In very simple terms, you essentially just need to find out who you really are. You're depressed because you just don't know who you are yet. And what you are is way bigger than what you thought you were. So all of these physical interactions that you're having on a day-to-day basis, you may think that they're serving you because they're putting you in a place of comfort, but if they're ultimately confining you from your truest nature, then you're going to be depressed until you make the choice to remove yourself from that and put yourself where you feel like you belong. This isn't necessarily something that happens externally. This is an internal process. It's fundamentally an internal process. If you have it externally without the internal process, it might as well have not existed. It's like trying to create a physical universe without an immaterial blueprint. It's the same thing. They go hand in hand. So what do? Here's what I would say. Another recommendation from my own experience. So you get to the point where you're like, okay, I need to find out who I am. How do I do that? Especially after you've been in a place where you feel dissociated from your true self. You come to a point where it's actually a point of confusion where you just don't really have a grasp of who you really are. There are so many options as far as what can be done next. Different people have different paths. I'll give some examples. For some people, spirituality is a route that helps get them there. Why is that? It's because it lets them focus on the fundamental problems rather than the byproduct of the problems. That's one. Another thing. Nature. Remove yourself from your current situation and just go to nature to find your true nature. It seems obvious, maybe like an easy metaphor there, but spend time alone. Remove yourself from everybody and find out who you really are. This might sound really daunting because it's a breach of a natural comfort zone that's developed as a result of a cycle. But not only this cycle, it's like we create comfort zones on all of the conditioning, all of the bases that we go through as we grow up. Okay. I absolutely forgot what I was talking about. Okay, so we were talking about the different paths that can be taken to remove yourself from this cycle. And once you get to the point where you at least have a better sense of where you are, you're in the fucking game. The cycle gets broken as you progress. The amount of progression doesn't really matter. It's a matter of the choices that you make that either align with progression or degression. Okay. Okay, now I'm gonna move on from this, and now we're going to move from the problem and get deep into the solution. And of course the solution is subjective, but it seems that it's in everybody's best interest to hear some different perspectives. Alright, so now we're gonna get pretty meta. When you talk about what does it mean to find yourself, because okay, if we're talking about finding yourself, we need to know exactly what that means, because it's a pretty abstract concept. Finding yourself is equivalent to finding the meaning of everything. And that's the way that this needs to be regarded. Once this journey has started, it's going to spiral infinitely. And for that reason, there are two things that can happen. And so this is very important to understand. There can either be a depression of knowing that you have infinite potential and you constantly feel like you're not expressing it full enough. And then there's the other side where suddenly you're infinite potential. And so what does that mean? That means that you're creating your reality. Or at least you have the choice to create your reality, right? Okay, so finding yourself equals meaning of, let's say, I wouldn't say finding yourself is the meaning of life. It's actually deeper than that. It's more quantum than that. Finding yourself is a process of meaning, of finding the meaning of not only life, not only death, but everything and nothing. So far, this probably sounds like the most I don't know, not a good solution just because it's so abstracted. But here's the issue, and this is why it is abstracted. I've thought about this quite a bit, and you can sit here and try to intellectualize the exact steps that it would take to remove somebody out of depression, but it's so deeply subjective that when you're talking about it on a mass scale, it's really important to consider the deeper levels of all of this, the deeper levels of everything, because it plays a role in our life. This is another thing that I'm going to talk about actually before I move on. Suicide. I think that it's safe to say that there's been almost a plaguing or a spreading of suicidal thoughts and tendencies within the collective, within everybody. It seems like it's becoming unusually prevalent. And this is absolutely tragic, but this is something that needs to be talked about, because this is actually a part of breaking the depressive cycle. Suicide is a very difficult topic. People don't know how to talk about this because it's so deeply emotional. It's so deeply conflicting. It's something that's almost incomprehensible. And for that reason, it has become tabooed in a way where not that people don't talk about it, it's just that it's been difficult for people to have more level, neutral conversations about it, at least emotionally, or like projecting emotionally. But here's the thing with suicide. It's the point, if you think about it, it's essentially wanting your own end. So what does that mean? Wanting your own end is actually an abstract concept. And the thing is that physical suicide kills people, but there's also an internal understanding that you can take. You see, this is the part that gets really tricky. This is the part that's incredibly tricky. Okay, this is the part that it actually is like, I don't know, I guess it's something that can be a slippery slope to even talk about, because it's really not discussed. But the thing with the cycle of depression is it usually ends after it gets to the worst point it can possibly get to. And this usually happens in two different ways. Actually, I won't even say it happens in two different ways. It happens in many different ways. But I'll essentially break it down from material death to psychological, egotistical death. And a death of an old way of thinking, an old way of being, a way of existing that never actually suited who you really were. And that type of death, the one that isn't physical, the one that allows you to create new changes in your life to become the most beautiful person that you feel like you can be, that's a very hopeful prospect. And it takes some maturity about being able to even speak with death, because usually there's so much fear associated with the idea of death that it's hard to actually talk about deaths that aren't really physical. But those non-physical deaths are generally the ones that bring people to a certain evolution. It's like, I don't know, like, for an example, I guess in society we see all the time this happening, you know? There are constantly deaths of ideologies that no longer serve people or anybody. And this happens all the time, and it changes the way people perceive the world. It changes the way that people handle their day-to-day. The physical death and the non-physical death are essentially a crossroads at the end of the cycle of depression. After that cycle plays itself out up until its maximum point, once it reaches its threshold, then there is a crossroad that appears. One of physical death and one of ideological death. One causes a lot of pain. That is the physical death for everybody. The non-material death, the death of old ideologies and belief systems that aren't true to your nature, that is the rebirth. So you come to the end of this cycle. About at this point, I'd be guessing you're getting more involved with learning about yourself in different ways. Part of finding who you are, you know, like we just got like, that was really meta for the most part. but bringing it down kind of to a more I don't know, like stable size for a second. Finding yourself is a process of finding out more and more the things that you like, the things that you love, the things that you are absolutely passionate about. And as well as those things that you hate, those things that make you angry and make you upset. Finding yourself means being able to feel the feelings that you have as clearly as possible. And it means being able to express yourself in your truest nature as much as possible. So now I'm going to go back just a second and talk about what I was saying when I meant that it's a point where finding yourself is not only about finding the things that you love, but it's also about finding the things that you hate. And why is that? That seems like it doesn't really make sense, right? Well, I'll tell you why. Because with the things that you love, you will have direction of where to go. With things that you hate, and hate, these are both loose terms, still abstract terms, but essentially just referring to the fact whether you resonate with something or you don't resonate with something. Let's just keep it more simple. Whether you resonate with something or you don't resonate with something. Those things that you resonate with, you will know from observation that they make you feel good. They make you feel inspired, activated almost, like empowered. And those things that you do not resonate with show you the things that are also still a part of you, but that you don't like and that you would like to help change. And your job isn't first and foremost to go change somebody else ever. You actually shouldn't be changing anybody. You don't need to. You just need to change yourself. And if you inspire others, then you got it. That's it. Whoa. Mappa, make America pasta again. Okay, so, let me see. Okay, so finding yourself. What makes you feel? This is a step-by-step. First, you need to break it down and figure out, just in general, what makes you feel. Whether it's good or bad or anything in between, it doesn't matter. Your job at that first step is just to figure out what feels. Does this thing make me feel any type of emotion, or does it make me kind of just neutral and, I don't know, unprovoked or unthoughtful about it? I don't know. Okay, so after you find out what makes you feel, then you start to determine what you resonate with versus don't resonate with. Okay. Resonate with versus don't resonate with. Okay, so once you figure out what you resonate with and you don't resonate with, then afterwards, you need to figure out what to do with the things that you resonate with and you don't resonate with. Okay, so the things that you resonate with, follow. Go with the things that you resonate with, the things that intuitively just make you feel good and happy. Yeah, those things that generally don't need thinking to make you feel good, they just do make you feel good. It's part of the experience. So, resonate, follow. If you don't resonate, you might think that the answer is don't follow. Actually, it's not quite that. The answer So, with the things that you don't resonate, you don't follow, but you don't also push away. The things that you don't resonate with, you distance yourself from, but still harmonize yourself with that thing from a distance. The difference between the two is, the two different ways of doing this is that if you're able to have a sense of compassion with the things that you don't resonate with, you will be much more at peace than fragmenting the things that you don't resonate with. So that's very important. So I would say, okay, so let's just use for simpler terms, resonate, follow, don't resonate, heal. So these things you want to heal. Now, step 4. So these first 3 steps, this is the pyramid. This is the catalyst that will allow the solidity of this new being. And so, after the pyramid, you have the catalyst, and then now you need to start stabilizing the change, right? Okay, so now we get to 4. So what is step 4? So now you need to apply essentially a bit of healthy skepticism. And maybe skepticism isn't even the right word here, but it's really important to constantly be, I mean, obviously, like, not every moment of your waking life, but like, a lot of times these things are happening on a deeper level where you don't have to necessarily exert effort. It's just part of your experience. And the next step really is to start refining those things that you feel like you resonate with and don't resonate with. Because at first, it's gonna be pretty out there. You're gonna be having the third step takes refining before it really starts to step out of its own chaos. This is a liberating moment. However, once you start refining this, it's almost like cleaning out your desktop, you know? Once you get the general idea of what you resonate with and don't resonate with, you refine to almost more detail-oriented things rather than the bigger picture, right? And you know what? Usually they tend to go hand in hand. So here is the refinement stage. It's a refinement, however, you're still doing the process that you did in 3. You're still kind of doing an internal examination of those things that you resonate with and those things that you don't resonate with. Okay. So then, what happens after that? So you're refining. So let me make something clear right now. This is all a very long-term process. And most of these things, pretty much all of them, have to happen internally before you fully have control of your own perspective to be able to manifest them in your physical reality. And that's really important to know. So like, this stage, once you reach 4, this is just gonna keep on spiraling out, right? However, this process from 1 to 4 is gonna constantly repeat itself in different ways. So for example, you may go through stage 1 of 1 through 4, right? And that could have been purely an internal manifestation where all of these things happened, but it was internal, and your external existence may still not resonate with your internal existence. So what do you have to do? You have to bring harmony, right? So then what happens? This whole process repeats again in a more physical sphere. Chances are, in that physical sphere, you expand, and then we'll need to update the software, and then afterwards update the hardware. I think that that's probably a pretty solid analogy in how this works. Once you have steps 1 through 4, once you have steps 1 through 4, it becomes so at that point, steps 1 through 4 are going in a bidirectional vortex between the hardware and the software. And they're constantly allowing each other to expand. And from that, you get growth. All types of growth. And okay. Let me make sure that we get this for a second. Alright. Okay. I'd like to just simplify this for a second. Maybe I'll just keep this up. If it's helpful. Okay. So let's just say that you're listening to this or you're watching this and you feel like the steps or the, I guess, like, explanation of depression that I gave doesn't really help you right now in your current situation, you know? If it feels too abstract or too far away from your current reality when you're dealing with a lot of physical problems. You know, one of the things that's really difficult about this, particularly about depression, is that it becomes quite harder to deal with when people are dealing with their survival, you know? It's something that really actually does take time and effort and stepping away to really be able to create a real change in your life. And right now, many people in the world are just trying to survive on a day-to-day basis, and they may be feeling just absolutely horrible. But the thing is, it's like, they don't even have the time to be able to think about it. So, I guess that's always I don't know, I guess it's just very important to see all of the different factors that play in and the things that create barriers between actually being able to heal something like depression. You know, I think that healing depression fully needs to be understood in a way where you're not dealing with permanence. You can't, because I think that this is actually something that probably reiterates the cycle, is that people get depressed for a while, and then they're not depressed for maybe a day or two, they suddenly have a fear of being depressed again because they were like, oh, that felt so shitty, you know, like I don't want to feel that again. That fear consciously creates that same depression. You're running away from it so much that you're magnetizing yourself to it. And it's important to just know that change is inevitable in this situation, and that there are so many different ways to walk away, essentially, you know? I've been through it myself. I wouldn't really be talking about this if I hadn't been through it myself. I went through very severe depression, and I was prescribed loads of medication, and like, none of it really helped. The only thing that truly helped me was kind of getting a better sense of who I was, because I realized that I wasn't living the life that I felt like I needed to be living, you know? And that really like caused some sort of like sensory like block or something where like things just weren't working out. And I think that it's really important to talk about depression in a way that can empower those people who are depressed, you know, because the way that I see it, it's really interesting. I feel like most of the smartest and most interesting people that I know are pretty depressed. And one thing that I realize is that it's almost like having a superpower, you know, like shout out to Kanye, but it's almost like having a superpower. And if harnessed and directed towards something constructive with love, it has so much potential to just be made a beautiful thing, you know? Imagine finding that one thing, that one activity, that one person, that one moment that makes everything worth it. Don't be afraid to have that reality, because you're creating your reality. You're constantly projecting your reality based on your thoughts, based on your words, based on your emotions, your energies, your interactions. It's important to feel empowered, to feel in control. And I wish that for everybody, you know? Anyways, all love, namaste.